This is talking about going to the penitentiary.
COINTELPRO reached the point of literally assassinating black organizers. Assassinating them. Fred Hampton was murdered in his bed in a Chicago police raid set up by the FBI, probably drugged, murdered another guy too. And nobody cared.
Now I'm going to go back to the first statement.
On the other hand, if you take a look at the prison population, I mean, it's just outrageous. A huge part of the black and Latino population are simply thrown into jail. That's mainly what the drug wars are about. It's a device for getting rid of superfluous people by tossing them into jail. And that certainly should not be tolerated. But again, if you go back, say, to 30 years, 35 years, COINTELPRO reached the point of literally assassinating black organizers. Assassinating them. Fred Hampton was murdered in his bed in a Chicago police raid set up by the FBI, probably drugged, murdered another guy too.
Fred.
And nobody cared.
Hammett, I think.
In fact, I went to his funeral in Chicago. I think I was one of about 10 white faces in a huge black audience. And nobody cared. In fact, probably very few even know about it because that was just what you do to people.
I want to stop you right there.
That's not the only case.
And I want to say, put that with a combination of all the blacks in prison, the black Israelites over there that seemingly are in prison, the influence of the United States on Israel to have such a separation of blacks and whites. Read Micah 2:1-2. The book of Amos, the backdrop was the wealthy were here, the poor was being exploited. Have we influenced and put some of our ways over on Israel? And knowing what we know now about the profits that were made from the prisons, obviously black people were made merchandise from the very beginning. And how's Israel's attitude is towards the black Israelites and Hebrews that got 60-day notices over there to leave Israel. And we know that the region, the black man lived in all those Middle East, North Africa, over in the Gulf where the American ships are, and the influence that we have on Israel. When you look at this thing, it could come down to this, and this is my opinion. Black lives really do matter. And attitudes towards them in this end time could determine many, many things. But more importantly, could United States be chastised for putting her ways over on and influencing the practices that the European Jews are practicing now? To what degree did they bring their influence? And who pays for this white supremacy that has reigned over black people and is trying to reign even now in Israel with the Hebrews, that the black Israelites that are being expelled? Even though it's a small number, it's still a number. If you start there, it could keep going, since the Trump administration just last year opened up an embassy there, because that's the same administration that despised Black Lives Matter. And I'm pretty sure they've heard the rhetoric of the Israelites here in this country about them warning of the judgments that's coming on America. But I would say the judgments, if they are coming on America, would it not only be from the catastrophic seeds that were sown way back in the past, but the seeds that are sown and the influencing of a nation even now. If Israel, the actual country that we see, which is, to me, this is just my opinion, it's like Hamor, the one in the flesh. But nevertheless, if we've been grafted in, the Gentiles, so let's just say, then where would that leave if you afflict the natural place where God's name is? If you cause it to go pagan, if you cause it to go into a setting like the book of Amos, where the rich and the poor and the oppressed. And you have influence on that. If God corrected the old Israel in history, why for the nations that corrected or influenced them, then God is no respecter of persons. He would have to turn around and correct the nation that influenced, like he did those nations, Babylon, etc., and corrected those nations for influencing the place where his name is supposed to be bared. So it's like a catch-22. With all the seeds that's sown, every Muslim knows, and every country over in the Middle East knows that the boss of Israel, the ammunition, the guns, everything they got comes from the United States. So those seeds of hatred, let's go 10 years, 20 years, and let's say they rise up. Who you think will pay for that? For our ships in the Middle East and for what they're sowing now? Could it, it's just a question, could it be our children? Well, we better prepare them now to love the Lord with all their heart and give themselves over to him, because it don't matter about what they obtain in the material. If there's any reckoning, a day of reckoning, with catastrophic consequences for all the roles that the United States has played, and I pray and hope not. I pray for mercy. Then what are we teaching our kids how to prepare for something that they can't see coming? Jeremiah 23 in Hoods.